Hello. Here's hoping this works because it's been a month, 2 months since we last did this show, and who knows if I even know how to run this. So we'll see. Anyways, this is Your Brand Your Business, a show where we talk about the business side of streaming. And I'm Galen Herbstick Cortina. This is my co-host Ernest Jones, and today we're going to be talking about invoices. I am hoping people can hear me because I see hi, but not, yeah, you're good. We'll see. But first, I thought before we got onto the topic of invoices, we could talk about where the heck we've been. Ernest, what have you been up to in the past month and a half?
So, because I'm such a wonderful person, I still am agreeing to do the show with Galen, even though I'm not sure if you noticed, he kicked me out of his house because he recently had a baby. So everyone should tell Galen congratulations, a beautiful baby girl, right? But because of that, they needed the space, so they moved me out of the room underneath their stairs, and I had to move. And then we had TwitchCon. And then I had a mini, like, the tax deadline was September 15th and October 15th for everyone who extended.
And why don't you tell people what those tax deadlines were, since most people only know about April.
Yeah, so what happens is if you file an extension, you have 6 months to get the return filed, but it's not an extension to pay. So if you have a business return, it's due September 15th. And if you have a personal return, which most US people do, it's October 15th. And then I was really stuck trying to figure out a term. Okay, so I'm gonna throw this to chat. You know when you have like a Reese's fun size like peanut butter cup, right? And you get 2 wrappers on it? There has to be a term for that, and I've been trying to figure out what that is, because it's not like, fortunate or anything. Also, we haven't been here for a while, so I was telling Galen
Makes me think of American Pie.
I have all these random asides. Like, for example, we all agree as a society that the best Starburst flavors are either red or pink.
Yes.
So what do you call, like if you get the fun size and you get double pink, double red, right? That's like winning for the day. But if you end up with double yellow, that's losing for the day.
That is pretty rough. And didn't they change green to be a different flavor?
Green doesn't exist anymore, I don't think.
Is that what it is? Oh, well, yeah. That's certainly different then.
Yeah. What have you had going on, Galen?
Yeah, let's see, the past month and a half. Well, we both were at TwitchCon, which was a lot of fun. We did a workshop and a panel. I got to see a bunch of people, which is nice. And we got to eat pizza tater tots and carne asada fries and a whole bunch of terrible things for us.
Yep,
my wife and I had a kid.
On your Twitter.
Yes. My wife and I had a kid, which, if I look beaten up and exhausted, that's a big part of why. She's lovely and she's wonderful, and she's waking up still 2 or 3 times a night, which really cuts into your sleep schedule. I'm self-employed, which is really nice because then I can, I don't have to be at work at 8 kind of a thing. But it definitely is a little tougher. But I post an egregious number of baby pictures on Twitter. So if you are interested in seeing baby pictures, go for it. She's 6 weeks old now and just started like really smiling, which is really cute. It's distracting actually in the morning when I have her on my lap and she's smiling, because then I'm like trying to get work done but trying to look at the smiling baby and balancing. But yeah, so that's I mean it was we had our daughter start of September. 2 weeks later was TwitchCon. A week after that I was in the Twin Cities for best friend's wedding. With that I was actually like in the wedding and speaking and giving a blessing and stuff like that, so I had to be ready and things. So I'm like just now finally back, which is perfect timing for getting all of my clients scheduled for checking in on health insurance in November, because they're largely self-employed, so they need to do the system, and then end of year business planning in December. So I'm about to be like just rolled over with work, but that's good. Nice. Hey, you remember the commands.
I do remember the commands. Yeah, we're professionals. So one thing before we transition to our topic today, I have a request of everyone in chat. Go to my Twitter and look at my tweet about tax planning, because Galen kind of hit it on the head. I need everyone to retweet or favorite or whatever to signal boost it, so everyone knows that it is time to do tax planning. So we can get everyone sorted and, try to save some people some tax. Hint, current clients. And so with that, let's talk about invoicing, because
Here,
this came up
I'll
as a
I'll do
subject.
the one quick baby picture. And you
Oh,
can do
okay, very
invoicing.
cool.
That's her from my phone, so apologies for the quality, but that's her. Um,
So pretty.
it was definitely tougher at TwitchCon. Oh, and we got the legally required pumpkin costume for Halloween. So, yeah. All right.
Oh,
Yes, invoicing. So this topic came to our it's something that we've talked about with clients for sure in the past, but this topic came to our attention and current thoughts because of a thread that Seriously Clara did on Twitter, where she essentially lamented how painful it was to get invoices from streamers so that she could pay them for the stuff that they had done. Um, so we wanted to talk about what an invoice is, why it matters to you, why you should care about it, and then maybe some ways that you can effectively do invoices if you're at the point of invoicing. This is something that a lot of businesses have to figure out right away because it's how they get paid. Twitch is actually a little different because they essentially handle your invoicing for you largely. At least for the viewer related stuff, or or Streamlabs, for instance, right? People are paying you for a service absent a contract, right? You're not providing a service or goods in exchange, in exchange for a set amount of compensation. You're getting compensated as you do things, and it's pretty variable, which means you're not doing invoicing. However, once you reach the point where you're starting to do some things that are actually on a contract basis, so that could be, if you're an artist commissioning emotes, that could be sponsored streams or just sort of general other content that you're doing where you're working with an outside company. You'll need to actually send them something to tell them what to pay you and how to pay you. So Ernest, what are some of the, well, first of all, generally what is an invoice? And then secondarily, what are some of the key things that should be on an invoice?
gotcha. So invoice originates from the Italian invoice.
Nice.
Okay.
Parli italiano? Perché
No.
parlo un po' di italiano.
Oh, see, this is my nightmare. This has backfired terribly.
Lawyers, don't ask questions you don't know the answer to. Go on.
Right. So an invoice essentially should have key elements to it. It should have it should identify you, whether it's your LLC or your business, or who this is coming from. It should be dated. It should have the amount that is owed. That's I would actually rank that number one. And it should have the payment terms, or when it's due. So, for example, it's fairly common. For example, I invoice net 30, meaning I expect once I tender the invoice, present it for payment, I expect to be paid 30 days after the fact.
What's your compliance rate with streamers?
That's actually pretty good.
Oh, okay.
They actually tend to pay me faster than they need to, because I tell them, like, look, paying taxes and paying an invoice for tax prep sucks. So there's like a 30-day window. So you've got some lead time to manage cash flow. But those are the key things that jump out at me. Ideally, if you are very good, you would have them numbered, so they're all unique, right? So you're not issuing invoice one over and over and over again. So you can go through your invoices if you've got quite a bit. You're invoicing quite a bit. You kind of hit on it. It's a strange thing for a broadcaster to consider, because they sign their affiliate or partnership contract, and they don't have to invoice Twitch, right? Because that, if you're, or whatever platform you're on, that automatically comes through per your contract, and they determine what the rev share is. Same thing with tips coming from the community, right? That's not anything, like you said, I'm signing an agreement like, oh, you've tipped me $5, sir, ma'am, I will now stream for another 10 minutes as per our agreement.
And that's one thing that's, worth reinforcing, is that the contract that you sign as an affiliate or a partner isn't for a specific good or service. It's how they will compensate you based on things that other people do while you are performing, but it's not one-to-one. It's not like you get X per hour streamed or anything like that. So it's definitely different.
I actually assist the client with invoicing for a specific thing. This person gets the advantage because they, essentially were client number 2. So they get, they get the pre-order bonus for all of my services. They say jump, I say how high. So I put it together for them, and it's pretty straightforward. I also put another thing, just looking at it, I put the payment term. So it's ACH, which means automatic clearinghouse, which I learned from Galen just yesterday. I never remember what it stands for. But it includes, their banking information as to how to route it, the key information to make that payment. And it, outlines specifically as well what was performed, right? So if this was for August services, July services, then that's what's stated on there. For example, say you did an activation, say you took part of the Apex event at TwitchCon or the Borderlands event, and you needed to invoice them because that all went through Twitch. But if you needed to invoice them, you would say, appearance or participation in Apex event at TwitchCon 2019, just something that the person who's paying that invoice can reference, or if they have questions, they can talk to someone in the company, right? Because actually, Galen, let's take a step back. In what circumstances can you see a broadcaster specifically needing to issue an invoice?
Most of the time for appearances or sponsored streams. So I'm picturing,
So I'm Game Dev Inc.
Yep.
Right. And I say, okay, Galen, I'm going to contract with you. You're going to broadcast our game on launch to, just see if it's good for your community and just advertise that, hey, this game is released and we think it's a good fit.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd hold up your end and you do the stream and you play the game. It's great. Everyone enjoys it. It's fantastic.
You fulfilled the terms of your contract.
Yep. You fulfilled the terms. And then what do you do?
Well, hopefully at that point, send an invoice. What a lot of people do is wait to get paid, and maybe they didn't realize that they had to send an invoice. But it's something that puts down on paper, that you expect to be paid for specific goods and services and the terms by which you should be paid. And sometimes, one thing I'll say about this is sometimes a company that is paying you needs an invoice to reference to be able to make the payment on their end, to do their own in-house tracking, bookkeeping, accounting, all that kind of stuff. They need an invoice that they can reference to say, I paid, these are the goods and or services that I paid for, and here's, and to market as paid. And until that comes in, they may not actually be allowed to pay you.
I would be surprised, honestly. I'm sure there are corner cases that exist, but they shouldn't be paying you unless you provide an invoice.
Agreed. Yep.
Because I responded to that Clara thread to say with that exact comment. And so, Galen, if you're running a company, right, and I do services for you, why wouldn't you pay me without an invoice?
Well, for one thing, depending on how it's sent, you might just subsequently be able to claim that I didn't pay you, or that what I paid you was for a different thing, or a whole mess of different things. Another one would just be it's hard for me to keep track of it. So, for instance, I have someone who works for me on a contract basis as a paraplanner and admin. He helps me. He helps me with some of my planning work. He helps me with scheduling clients. He takes notes during client meetings. He's super helpful.
He carries Galen in Borderlands 3.
No, he does not. I run a solo build. Thank you very much. We have played Borderlands 3 though, but it's our version of golf. Ernest, and I have played Borderlands 3. Ernest and I will play Risk of Rain. There was a Risk of Rain update thing that they did today, by the way. But every month he sends me an invoice documenting all the things that we've discussed. It comes with an invoice number, which is useful for me because that unique identifier then means subsequently, if we were talking about a past invoice, we could be making sure that we're referencing the same thing. That would be more relevant if it wasn't just once a month, but still, it's a relevant thing. He puts on there what he's billing me and for what reason. So he has a different hourly rate depending on the service that he's providing, and it's based on hours. So he puts that in there. And it gives me a method to pay him. He does it via QuickBooks, which he uses for his bookkeeping, and it gives me a method to pay him that then we both get confirmation that it's paid, and therefore it's a neat little circle of he told me what I needed to pay him for, I paid him for it, we both get confirmation that it's paid, and it's entered into his bookkeeping software. But if I didn't get that invoice from him, I would be, A, having to track down how much I owed him, presumably, and B, a lot less comfortable making a payment on it because then I don't have documentation saying that I did it except for a transfer notice. That could be for literally anything.
So underlining those points explicitly. Number one, they're not going to pay you just because of the legal issues that could be involved with that, right? Because you could say, like you said, you didn't pay me for this or for something else. So the company needs that for their own legal protection and your legal protection. Number two, just ease, right? We want to be able to say, have that check and balance of, hey, this is how much you said I paid you. This is for this month. We're settled. We're good. Let's continue on. And number three, I would say, most broadcasters are not getting to the point where they are in the activation realm, right? Like you're still following, building your community and doing the growth curve, right? And once you are doing activations, I'd argue you're more likely than not full-time, right?
Well, you're getting there, yeah.
And so the question becomes, is to me, this also lends a air of professionality to what you're doing, right? I would say if you are on top of your administrative homework where you are invoicing these companies, they're more likely to work with you because
you make it easier.
You make it easier, right? That's kind of, I think, Galen and my business model kind of at large, right? Like we make it easy for people, as easy as possible. Like, you know, you may get a manual email saying, hey, let's talk about tax planning.
You may hear some squalling in the background. I apologize.
Oh, no. That's another Galen
She has awoken.
I don't think that's a word.
Squalling? It is a word. Squawking would be accurate too, but...
Sure.
Squalling is more like a storm or... No.
Are you looking
up
the word?
Gerund or present participle squalling. Of a baby or small child, crying noisily and continuously. I used an extremely specific term. Thank you very much.
Listen, that Berkeley education, there's no keeping up with me. You're just so smart. Look at him. Look, he's so smart, so handsome.
I don't have my diploma up for Cal. I should do that. It's over there.
You should? Yeah. You should actually. I need to do that. But you want to make it easy for people. You want to have this professionalness about you, right? And so that if you make it easy for people and you seem professional, or are professional, it makes it a lot more easier for people to work with you, and they're more likely to work with you again. We've all gone through life where we've probably worked with someone who was not professional. How likely were you to go back to them and bring your business?
Unless they just were the absolute best at what they did and it was worth muddling through it. No, I tend to work with people for whom, you know, I can get responses from them and I can get actual information from them. And, in the case of if they're a vendor to me, like I can actually pay them easily because that matters to me on my side. I need to know what I owe, right? I need to make sure I have enough cash sitting in the bank and I'm not just paying it out to myself to cover my liabilities. So if I'm not getting invoices in a timely manner and I'm just having to like kind of remember that I owe someone money, that's really bad for me business-wise. Like that makes things way more difficult. And the reverse is true too, right? If I'm sending, or if you're a broadcaster and you need to send out invoices to get paid and you don't have a good system for doing it, or you're just not doing it for some reason, then you don't know when you can expect money to come in. And that is like basically the biggest stressor I hear from streamers on the financial side is uncertainty around like their payments and how much they'll get in a month. So anything that you can do to smooth that, to make it a little bit more predictable, the better. And keeping on top of invoicing is one of those big things. First of all, just why the heck wouldn't you want to get paid sooner, right? If it's, say, net 30, like Ernest was saying for his, meaning you get paid 30 days, payment is due 30 days after receipt of the invoice, start the clock ticking.
Yep. Now, one thing with that, one caveat is, don't start it before you perform the services.
No.
Or read your contract, make sure you know, hey, when am I supposed to be paid?
Yeah, exactly.
Because, I've seen contracts where it's just to your point, like, okay, it's, due 30 days after services have been rendered and when the invoice is issued.
Yeah.
Right. So if you do an event, we've got the, what is it called? The HyperX esports arena here in Vegas in the Luxor, right? And oftentimes broadcasters will come and they'll do an event, whether it's like new game launch or they're there to like promote like an esports thing or what have you. And I imagine there are contracts there. So you come for the day, you do the event, you get on your plane back home whenever, and you should invoice in the next day or so, right? Like that should be the process. I've got like a checklist for when I'm prepping taxes as an example. Okay, client approval, go over draft with client. Okay, file return, issue invoice, right? Like that's kind of the last step you do when you're performing a service. I mean, what's your invoicing process like, Galen?
Mine's a little easier because of how I've structured how I get paid. So mine goes out. I have a service that I use where mine goes out automated monthly. So the client signs a contract once and then signs up for this service, and then it debits automatically. So mine's a little easier, but I put in the time and effort ahead of time to find a service that lets me do that on an automated basis, so I don't have to worry about it. It's also easier because I'm generally doing flat fee, right? So if it was something variable where it was based on the hours that I put in or based on complexity that changed month to month, it would be very different. But for me, it's flat fee, so that's a little easier. But again, I used to do my invoices manually, and now I don't, and that saves me a bunch of time, and I get paid on time, and I don't even have to think about it, and it's wonderful. One thing I'll say that what I just talked about brings up is invoicing is a service I have functionally outsourced, right? I only have to do it once, it gets set up, I don't have to think about it again. If you're working with an agency or a management group, it's very common to have them handle your invoicing. In fact, it's generally a good thing to do. That's usually a part of their job. So if you are at the point where you're starting to find sponsored stream kind of things, but you aren't yet at the point where you have someone working with you on an agency or management role, then this is that window where you need to do those invoices, and it's extra important that you do it. If you're looking to bring on someone for those roles, it may be worth explicitly stating, or having it explicitly stated that they will be handling your invoices, and then also the terms that come for how you get paid from that, right? Because if they if you're looking at a bigger agency like someone like OPG or Loaded, I guess now they're still Loaded, right? The Pop Dog's the parent company. But anyways, they'll do large activations across their client base or across a good portion of their client base, where likely what happens is they get paid a lump sum for the activation, and then it gets split, proportionally across the, per contract across their people. You need to know not only when they're sending those kinds of things out, but then when you're getting your piece of it on the back end, right?
Yep. And also knowing what they're charging you for that, potentially, because you may say, like, I can do this. I don't want to,
Right. Hopefully they're doing more for you than invoicing.
It's kind of the example of anyone who's done anything with contracting, right? You have this thing called the general contractor in construction. They kind of oversee the job site as a whole, and then they bring in all the specialty trades. You could have a marble mason, you could have electric, you could have general carpentry. And what happens is those specialty services don't get paid until the GC get paid.
How nice is this house that you just bought if you have someone doing marble work for you?
Listen, don't worry about it. I looked at the Trump Forbes profile, and it's just gold everywhere. Okay? Solid gold. It's very classy. It's the best house. Okay? Made by the best people. No?
I'm in pain. Okay. Go on.
But essentially, I used to do a lot of construction accounting and construction work here in Vegas. And so that's one thing I'd always hear the subcontractors complaining about how, I'm stuck because the GC's getting strung out on a job, and they're not going to pay me until 30, 60 days after they get paid, right? Because they've got to, there's this issue when you're working with that higher level management company in this example, because they've got to meet their operation costs and their own cash flow issue. So it's not uncommon for them to have a 30 to 60 day pay window on after they've collected.
There's a reason that Twitch only just moved to net 15 payout.
Yeah, that's very impressive that they were able to do it. I mean, I think the
scale that they have to pull that off, which
Amazon helps. But I mean, that's, Galen and I have walked all sorts of different business lives. That's very impressive to be able to pay out in 15 days.
But that's them figuring out that they have the scale and probably just business heft to swing about, that they can get really promising payment terms from the people paying them, which means that they can also give you promising payment terms. But again, these are all things that should be outlined in a contract that you then put through to the invoice itself, right? People who pay me for instance, people who pay me for investment management are paying me quarterly in arrears, meaning that they're paying me for the investment management service I provided for the previous quarter after that quarter is done. Which I, of course, need to know then when I'm subsequently having invoicing done so that I'm not billing them in advance and breaching contract and so on and so forth, right?
Well, and so that's a good transition point.
Mm-hmm.
A question I underlined when we talked about doing that is what is have you ever had an issue, or how would you advise someone to deal with an issue with an invoice? So you issue the invoice to the contractor, or I'm sorry, the company, and they say, hey, this looks wrong. And they're saying, like, we think it should be less. What do you do in that circumstance?
I mean, you should be referring back to your contract. Your contract should have specific terms that play into that payment. If it's an hourly rate, if it's a lot of, like, for instance, a lot of the bounty board stuff, they do it by brackets of viewership that relates to a payout percentage, right? But you should, the invoice should just be the clerical, after the fact explanation of the, dollars and cents of you performing on a contract. So if you have, so hopefully you have a lawyer that you're working with who helped you, with review that contract and make sure it makes sense. And hopefully you actually read it before signing it and actually looked at what the payment terms and stuff are. But that's what it should be. There should be a document signed by both parties that outlines those terms, and then you should be able to translate that into your invoice. It's very easy to do if it's, hey, I've got this 2-hour VOD that shows me streaming your content for 2 hours like we agreed. If it's something a little more variable, my paraplanner does his own time tracking, then you should have a system on the back end that you can point to saying, again, assuming it's time-based, I did A, B, and C as we talked about. Here's my, proof of it. And that's how it flows through to the invoice.
And so what I would say is, and that's not to say that, it immediately becomes a legal issue. It's more of the, what I would say, you should be prepared that if there is some sort of discrepancy, you could have made a mistake, or there could be a mistake on their end.
Oh, I've accidentally sent someone a $3,000 invoice instead of a $300 one where I just fat fingered to zero. And they reached back out to me and went, and I was like, oh, good catch, right? Like,
yeah,
that has totally happened.
Yeah, it's to say that we're all human and that misunderstandings and mistakes could happen. And just where would you go to determine what was correct, right? We've done shows on contracts, right? Yep. If you're doing one of these things, you should have a contract in place. And so that's going to detail out your payment terms, and that's going to essentially inform how that invoice should be completed and what details should be there, and how you get paid. So then on that, so we've talked about invoicing generally. One thing to underline and make it explicit is that an invoice essentially is a one-page document that shows who should be paid and how much and when.
Yep.
That's really what the purpose of the document is. So having said that, Galen, what would you say is the, how do I go about invoicing? Do I have to have special software? How do I do this?
So at its most basic level, you could find invoice templates online that are free and very good. There are, like, literally, if you just Google free invoice template, there's an invoice generator website that just lets you do it for free in a nice format, so on and so forth. You fill in all the information. Microsoft Word has templates. Excel has templates. Google Sheets has templates, right? There are a whole bunch of ways that you can do this with software that you might already have. Beyond that, assuming you're using PayPal, which most streamers are, PayPal has an invoicing function. Like, if you go into, I'm obviously not going to show my PayPal, but if you log in,
no, show it. I think it'll be fine.
There's that. I do almost nothing through PayPal actually, so I don't think there's anything like untoward or anything like that there. But if I'm just pulling it up on this monitor. If you are looking at PayPal and you go, under tools, the top one is invoicing, and if you click that, it brings up a thing that says create invoice, and you just press plus, and then it pulls up an invoice template that prompts you to enter everything, and that should be not anything extra cost wise for what you already have in terms of transaction costs that you pay to PayPal. So you literally could just use PayPal, the service you're probably already using. If you've paid attention to the show, followed a lot of advice, and you're using bookkeeping software like QuickBooks Online, for instance, generally those also have an invoicing function. And that invoicing function is really nice because then if someone pays on that invoice, it goes into your bookkeeping software. And so you don't even have to like then go back and spend time to actually do bookkeeping to the same level because it's just handled. So like I said, at its most basic level, you can look for free stuff. And then if not, you can, if you want to use something that ties into your payment processor or into your bookkeeping software, those exist and are not that hard to use. Do you have anything? Are there other things that I've missed that you like using?
So, well, one thing we've talked about is personally you use ACH, which doesn't attach a fee to it.
Right. It does. It's 1%, but it's
1%.
It's 1%.
I use a third-party payment provider, so like a PayPal type, and they charge 2.9% plus
and 30 cents
per transaction.
The standard credit card rate.
Yeah, exactly. And so I like it because I'm sure I could do this with the ACH, but my business is a little different than yours in that it's much more transactional. So I like being able to send an invoice, have automated reminders, which is something we'll talk about, and then they can just pay with a card and I don't have to think about it.
Yep.
Right. So it sends a reminder 15 days out, I think 1 day out, day of, and then 1 day after. I may have adjusted it since then.
Mine has periods that are preset that I could adjust for when it does late notices and stuff like that, but I don't know them off the top of my head.
So here's a question for you that I saw in that thread, Galen, this will give you a chance to wax poetic, is do you think it is rude to remind a vendor, or I'm sorry, a company rather, that they owe you money 15 days out from when it's due or the day of?
No, not at all. It's good practice. It could be that they're planning on paying it and the 15-day reminder is meaningless and no one cares and everyone goes about their day. Could be that they forgot that they owe it or lost it as a part of their internal processes, so now they have a reminder to do it. And it could be that they never knew that they had to. It was never on their radar. And so then this gives them the opportunity to research ahead of time to make sure that they're actually, that they're actually making payment for a contract that was signed and so on and so forth. But no, it's a good thing to do. And it's something that, it's something that is so normal in business that everyone expects it. It's, like I said, streaming is actually really unique that you aren't invoicing. A friggin' receipt at a restaurant is an invoice, right?
Yep. It's the only difference between that and an invoice technically is a receipt is given to you after rendering payment, but technically they give it to you before you pay.
Yeah. That is your that's your invoice, is that piece. So this is so normal in everything else. It's just streaming where you don't have to do it at first because of the way that the platforms operate and with how you get paid. But no, other companies expect it. Other companies want you to send them invoices. Other companies don't want to have unpaid liabilities sitting on their books that they don't know exactly when it is they're going to pay. There's a whole episode of Seinfeld that revolves around him cashing a birthday check from his grandma decades later, where it bounces because she had changed banks in the ensuing decades, and it's this whole drama because it's Seinfeld.
Did you just Boomer clap all of chat?
Seinfeld's on all the time. It's still the most syndicated show there is.
Isn't that Friends at this point? And Friends is pretty dated at this point.
It is.
I feel like you need to have an office reference for the demo in chat and for broadcasters.
Okay.
I mean, I agree. I like Seinfeld more than Friends and Interact, but I'm just saying it is a dated reference. So you got to come up with an office reference.
I'm trying to think of one where there was an unfulfilled payment promise. I know of times that they missed shipments and things like that because someone didn't perform, but I can't think of a specific one like this.
So anyway, you've got a homework assignment to binge all of The Office again in the next week.
We've been watching it because we have a whole bunch of time where my daughter's not awake or things like that where we need to be around. But anyways, point is, not knowing that the reason I was making this not wildly out of date reference is because you have if you have as a business a liability that you need to pay because of a contract that you signed, but you aren't ever given the option to pay it, it can come at a really inopportune time that you don't necessarily know in the future that can make your life suck a lot more, right? The timing of payments for every business is very important and something that you should keep an eye on. So having an invoice that you send to companies helps you get paid earlier, which is better, and helps them know what they owe, which is better. So everyone is happier if you invoice. About the only way it could be better for them is if you literally the other party is if you literally forget that they owe you money. But even then, they may have an internal note. Like if someone, like if I were to owe someone money and I know that and I haven't paid them yet, that's just sitting on my books as an unpaid liability, and it bugs me every time I look at my bookkeeping.
Yep. We had someone have a disruption in the payment cycles, and it was, I mean, they're in terms of the Twitch world, if you look at all broadcasters, very successful, and it was massively disruptive to what they were doing. And this is someone who, does all the things that we've talked about, has a 3-year savings window, has all these things in place, and just because a payment got moved 45 days out instead of 15 days out, it was disruptive to what they do. So by no fault of their own. And I tell that story simply because you should be invoicing, because the world itself is chaotic enough without you adding to the own disruptive nature of your own life. Right? So we always keep it to an hour. So we are 15 minutes out. I don't know if my chat crashed or anything, because I just don't see a bunch of poggers in our normal sort of stuff when we're talking. So any questions at all about invoicing or anything generally? What?
You recall how exciting our streams are a lot differently than I do.
I've told you that when we were prepping before the show that I was in extra shitposty mode, and I had a bunch of jokes written out because I haven't had the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, sorry, I've been denying you that.
You have. This is just a nightmare. But I mean,
only there's someone else who could have taken up the mantle of streaming this.
If only. So on that note, as we wait for any questions to come in, I would say we're taking efforts to make the show more consistent, simply having some redundancies in place with assets so that myself or the big timer himself, Noah, Esquire, DDS Downs, has the ability to host and be able to put on the show and discuss business-related topics, because if nothing else, my mantra has always been that we try to provide as much educational content as possible, simply because the more healthy the streaming industry is, the better off Galen and I are. And so it's not like we're looking for clients, not that we would be unwilling to work with anyone, but it's just the better off it is that people are getting paid and not, getting charged with high crimes and misdemeanors. It's good for us. So, all right. So I don't think we have any questions on invoicing. Not surprising, considering it's a pretty straightforward topic.
It's really straightforward. Just do it and use free templates, and everyone will be happier and better off.
Yep. Basically, an invoice. So very quick wrap up. An invoice is a document that you present that shows the who, when, and how much to get paid. Look at your contract for the terms. Make sure that you're sending it to the right person, and do follow-ups.
And actually, that's a good point to say very briefly. You should also, especially if it's a bigger company, you should figure out to whom you need to send an invoice. Because if it's me and my company, well, it's basically just me, right? But if you're working with 2K, right, that's a big company. There's probably a person outlined in the contract or a contact that you're supposed to send stuff to. So.
Or a specific payment, influencer payments at 2K or something like that. Mm-hmm. Where it all gets routed to a single thing, scanned in, okay, here's what the invoices to pay.
Yep.
So that's important to note as well as the contact information. All right. So unless you had anything else, Gillen, I think we wrap up so you can get to the beautiful baby girl.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna try and give my wife a break because it's definitely a lot of work caring for her. All right. I am Galen Herbstick Cortina. I'm a financial planner who works with streamers, and I want to say thank you for tuning in for this. I'm glad that things have finally calmed down enough that we're able to actually have a show again instead of just running around with our heads cut off with babies and moves and Twitch cons and the like. So
And tax planning and
tax
stuff
planning,
like that.
yeah, that's right. Ernest, who are you?
I am Ernest Jones. I am a CPA. I primarily specialize in tax compliance and tax planning for broadcasters, game developers, esports professionals, and anyone else who needs that sort of service. You can find me on Twitter. It is in the chat. I'm going to put Galen's command first because he's the host. And it's glad to be back, like doing these. They're fun. Trying to make Galen laugh and cringe. And so we'll be doing that more in the coming weeks. If there's any topics or anything that you'd like us to discuss with a business bent, at any point, feel free to add us or let us know, and we'll see how we can turn that into a show for y'all.
Yep, so. There is a Your Brand Your Business channel in Discord, and you can just use that one. That one would work really well because we'll get to see it. All right, later, folks. Bye.
Bye-bye.